So stay with us. Let me ask you a question. How strong is the building you are living in right now? How solid, how reliable is the integrity of the walls, the pillars, and all? Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea?
No.
Well, gratefully we can laugh over it now, but it wasn't funny when it is not funny anytime we have to have this kind of occasion of building collapse. Of course, that the building collapse issue has become a norm, or rather, it's become a menace, and God forbid that it will become a norm in our country with the continuous rate of collapses that we have from time to time.
In the last 2 weeks, one can safely say that it may be becoming a norm.
Which is why I said God
frequency,
forbid. Exactly.
You know.
The latest of them, we understand, is a 3-story building along the Awoshika Avenue of Bodija in Ibadan. Yeah, that should send some shivers down because you schooled in Ibadan, so you'd understand. That's, of course, the Oyo State capital in Nigeria. And 7 people were said to have been injured in that collapse. So the building was said to have been sealed off by government. Another one said to have been sealed off by government before work recommenced on site.
Which is the same story we heard about the one that collapsed in Lagos.
In Lagos. So there are the pointers to the use of substandard materials as the major cause of this incident, and also the issue is not just going to go away unless we do what we need to do about it to ensure that, we save ourselves. Last Sunday, of course, the one that you're referring to, that building collapse in Oniru area of Lagos, where 5 persons were confirmed dead as an uncompleted 7-story building which was undergoing construction at Obaidu, Oniru Street, Victoria Island. So, of course, there was also another one reported in Abuja. So, yes, you're correct. Within about 3 weeks or so, yeah. Abuja had its fair share in August last month. 2 people were confirmed
Then there was
dead.
one in Kano.
Yes, another one in Kano as well.
God.
Well, let's discuss this morning with 3 gentlemen, all structural engineers. So that's why I asked about the structure of the building you're living in. Ben Inyerionwu is with us this morning. Engineer Ben Inyerionwu, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Engineer Adeyinka Adeboye, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, sir.
As well as Engineer Bright Upono, thank you for being here this morning. And let me begin with you, Engineer Inyerionwu. Each time you hear a building collapsed, you must feel devastated.
Sure.
And what readily comes to mind for you?
Well, when a building goes down under construction, it's quite a different ballgame. When the building goes down, after it's been constructed and people are already occupying it. So when a building goes down under construction, the feeling I get is a failed enforcement of building codes and practices.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's understand the differences. So you've dichotomized 2 now.
Sure.
A building that collapses after it's been completed and people are living in it, and a building that collapses under construction. What's the difference? They're all buildings.
Yeah, they're all buildings, but you find out that a building is such that it is designed to carry its own weight and the weight of the occupants. So that is the goal of every building. But while it's constructing, you've not even added the extra weight.
The human beings.
And it's going down.
Okay.
So that shows you that something is fundamentally wrong, which has to do with enforcement of the applicable rules, codes, and standards, which is very, very unfortunate as we see them happening all over the place.
Okay. Engineer Adeboye, what are your first thoughts on this?
When we have any building collapse, the first thing that normally comes to my mind is that somebody is not doing what he's supposed to. And my first blame always go to the client. You are the initiator. The cost and everything is coming from you. So you determine who are the people to work with you from the design stage and the construction stages. So what's the first blame is always the client that maybe refuse to do the due diligence, having the mind of cutting corner, or having the mind of getting a quack so that to get a cheaper or cheap labor. So when
but Mr. Deboye, the client may have the right crew, let me use that word, but it is the crew that is trying to make more money off the client by cutting corners. That also is an option, isn't it?
Yes, that is an option, but that is occasionally. The major, let's say 80% of it, is that at least, let us, for an example now, we all know that we have a professional structural engineer, and we all know that anything that will be a little bit a good quality will be a little bit high.
Costly, yes.
Costly. But now you have somebody that wants to maybe carry out a structural design for you, let's say 500,000. Then you now have another person of 100,000. And then what you have in mind, majorly, is the cost. You are not going to get a good design that you can be able to have a rest of mind on. That is the aspect I'm talking about.
Okay.
We all know in Nigeria that majorly, our clients really want everything cheaper from
Everybody
the materials.
wants everything cheaper. As much as possible.
Let me bring you in at this stage. Let's analyze what he has just said. That it is the client who is trying to cut corners. Somebody has given him a quote for 500, but he goes for the one of 100. Whose duty is it to ensure that whichever one he decides to use, a specific quality of material must be used for that building, whether it is 100,000 you choose or 500, the quality that you must use must be XYZ. Whose job is it to determine that?
Okay, thank you. The building construction is unfortunate the way it takes in Nigeria today. Ordinarily, Quackery is empowered by law to regulate.
Who's that, please?
Quackery,
yes.
Council for Regulation of Engineering Practice in Nigeria.
Engineering practice, okay.
It's the only body empowered by law to regulate engineering practice, construction inclusive. The issue of patronizing somebody who will take 100,000 or 500,000 is an act of ignorance, and to a large extent because the laws have not been applied appropriately. Now, we have engineers that are registered. We have standard for determining cost for executing a particular project, which we call EcoPace, which Quackery gave out, which is like a recommendation. Now, when you engage a registered engineer, he knows what he should do. He knows what is expected of him to do. The issue of materials, people have pointed out materials. Of course, you can equally have good materials on site. If the mix is not proper, it's like somebody who wants to cook.
Cement to
sand.
sand.
It's somebody who wants to cook. You have meat, you have everything. But if you're a bad cook and you added more salt than necessary, of course you have the ingredients separate, independent. Could have been adjudged to be good, but the mix will be maybe bad. Then you have a very bad product. So your question, who determines the quality? Of course, in our university training, is the only person trained to actually know what is right, the right mix, and the right procedure is actually the structural engineer.
Is it possible for me to build a house without a structural engineer?
No, it is not possible.
Does it happen in Nigeria?
It happens in Nigeria.
So it is possible.
No,
That's why we have
you see, when you say it is possible, yes, people are doing it, but by law, like Lagos State government law says, for you to submit your building documents and for it to be acceptable to government, no other professional is required to write a letter of supervision except the structural engineer.
How old is this law you're talking about?
This law, it has been there since.
So let me assume over the past 20 years,
Yes,
at least, right?
Yeah, it has been there.
Yet we have had so many building collapses in Lagos.
Yeah.
Yes. Reason being that is where implementation comes in.
Implementation of the law.
Yes.
Is that to say that most of the collapses do not happen, they happen because structural engineers do not sign off?
For example, some of the collapses we had, we were told that some of these buildings do not even meet the approval requirements. Some don't have permits, some were sealed, and the clients went ahead to continue. Some of the documents usually that they could not, maybe they didn't meet up to the requirement, could be no structural engineer on the site. When I say structural engineer, we must equally understand it's not every civil engineer that goes around is a structural engineer. So this issue of quacks could be someone could be a graduate, yes, it's a quack in that area. You need somebody who is registered, recognized as a structural engineer to endorse that your approval document and accept the responsibility to supervise. The question is, we in this country, we have buildings, 12-story buildings, 15-story buildings that are still standing, built 20, 30 years ago. So why is it that if 20-story building can stand, why should the 7-story building collapse?
Okay. Well, engineer, you began by saying anytime there is a building collapse, the first thing that comes to your mind is failure of enforcement or compliance to the rules. And then we've also heard a situation, I mean, let's take the last one in Lagos, for instance. And it's also the first time I'm hearing that a government official as high as a commissioner would resign simply because a building collapsed in Lagos and the state government has decided to be a little more forceful. In a situation such as this one where the laws were complied with, enforcement was initiated, but some folks somewhere, owner of the property that you referenced the other time, would go back and say, go ahead and continue. He comes with his own enforcement against the enforcement of government. In that case, what happens?
Well, it's quite unfortunate because the only thing that can make a developer or a client do such a thing is because there are no consequences. There are no consequences. If there are consequences, they wouldn't do that. And I tell you the truth. The solution doesn't really lie, or it doesn't all lie in what my colleague here have just said, getting approvals from the engineer, endorsed and all that. It also comes from having a structural engineer round the clock on site. Because most people just believe that because the drawing has been endorsed by the structural engineer, he has taken responsibility through a letter, it's all okay. No, it's not all okay. We need to enforce the law that says that when the building construction is going on, there should be a resident structural engineer on site.
No matter the size of the building?
No matter the size of the building, because he is the one that said he's going to supervise.
Okay.
Because what happens is that when that letter is written and they endorse the drawing, they go away. You don't even go to the site anymore.
Perhaps to also quickly
that's where the problem starts from.
You will help us also understand. Who is a structural engineer? What are his functions or responsibilities at the site?
Sure, thank you. A structural engineer on site has the responsibility to ensure that the building construction is carried out according to design. According to design. And while construction is going on, is also reviewing the design and says everything meets the required standard.
So, Mr. Ben.
Sure.
That building that collapsed on Gerrard Road, the 21-story, we were told that it was not supposed to have been 21. But a building of that nature, in that neighborhood, would you say that there was no structural engineer on site? Because we were told it wasn't supposed to have gone as high as 21.
There was a structural engineer on site, and as we are made to understand, he even pulled out of site.
In protest?
In protest, because the building was illegally turned into a 20-story building. He moved that out of sight.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say here is that having an engineer on site is paramount to preventing building collapse. It's not just enough signing the drawing and it goes home.
Okay. Mr. Adeboye, about 4 years ago, Lagos State instituted a building code. From your practice, because you are in the industry, is that code being adhered to?
Okay, yes, we have a lot of code apart from building code from the Lagos State. We have a BSc code that we are using. We have a national code that we are using. Everything still go to the implementation. And everything, when you're talking about implementation, we still need to refer to the client. Most of the time, when the client contacted you for a structural drawing, the agreement is that after the drawing, you will be the one to be coming to the site when they are carrying out any structural element to see. And we all know that this thing has a cost to it. But when they collect the structural drawing, you won't see them again.
Who? You will not
the client.
You will not see the client?
You will not see the client because you have an agreement that, okay, when they are about to finish the foundation, you have to come and look at the reinforcement to be sure that it was according to the what they have in the working drawing. But because they don't want to pay extra cost, they may not contact you anymore. And then the alteration, we have to talk about the alteration too.
Is that because structural engineers charge stage by stage, or what?
It depends on.
Is there a block charge that he has to pay the structural engineer?
It depends on the nature of the building, and then the agreement between the structural engineer and the client. Sometimes the structural engineer, you may be contacted to be on site throughout the project. Okay. And sometimes you produce the structural drawing, and then you have to be going to the on-site to monitor every structural element stage. Like let's say a raft foundation, before they can start the casting, you have to go and see the reinforcement placement that is according to your structural working drawing. But most of the clients will not come back to come and inform you anymore because they have gotten the drawings and they think that is all. It's not all. And sometimes the alteration, let's us say it's a seat room of 6 meters by 6 meters. When you are doing your design, you consider the 6 meters in your design. On getting to the site, the client can decide that the sitting room is too small. This will increase it to 9 meters. Not knowing that the 3 meter difference can cause collapse because it's a lot. So you need a structural engineer to come and review the drawing. That is why I'm saying you don't need to cut corner anytime you are talking about a structure. You don't need to, because the structural engineer knows the parameter used in those designs. It's not something you can just agree with your contractor on site and change the structural design just like that.
Well, Mr. Okono, is the client not being penny wise, pound foolish at the end of the day?
Of course.
You spend all that money, and in 3 years, your building collapses, or even collapses while it is still being constructed.
Of course, that is the truth. The question is asked, the responsibility of structural engineer on site. You see, my years of experience and interaction with clients have shown me a funny trend. Most Nigerian clients are interested in the aesthetics of their building.
Not the structure.
The painting, how they curves and all those. And usually I tell them, look, it is only when the structural frame is solid, stable, that you can talk about aesthetics. A structure that is weak and collapse. All the paint, you see clients in Nigeria, They can spend millions of naira, 10, in fact, 100 times the fee that structural engineer would have asked for to do tiles, do fantastic POP, yet you refuse to pay somebody who will ensure the integrity, stability of your building.
But you don't blame them.
Like you said?
Just a second.
Yes.
You buy a car.
Okay.
You don't buy the engine.
Yes.
You bought the car.
Yes.
You want to drive anywhere with it.
Okay.
And it looks fine.
Fine.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That analogy may not come in. Yes, because sorry, before you go far.
Wait. There are connections.
Yes.
A car has pillars, has frames,
Okay.
an engineering
Chassis.
function as well,
Yeah.
chassis and body frame and all those things, has an engine and the rest of it.
Okay.
But the guy who bought the car bought a car.
Okay, I will ask you.
Wait now, Oga, wait. It is fine.
Yeah.
Leather seats,
Yeah.
cool AC.
Yes.
Inside, it has fine smell.
And he has
Interior.
technology.
And it has technology, touch screen. That's what the guy bought.
Thank you.
The guy wasn't told about the engine, the chassis, the body frame, and all those things, and it is black.
Okay.
It's fine. That's what the guy bought. Parallel to the vehicle, to the cars, to the building,
Yeah.
the fellow wants to point to a fine-looking building.
Okay.
Period.
Well, let me ask you. Do you know in buying car, you buy brand?
Correct.
Assuming you now hear that Dr. Bright has set up a car plant in Nigeria. You've not heard of me at all. You don't know anything about me. I'm not texted, trusted, nothing. I now produce a car.
Yes.
Now, but
Let me even make it worse. Let me even make it worse.
Mercedes,
Mr. Bright,
is
wait.
texted, trusted. In terms of aesthetics, they're good. Durability, you have all the parameters rated. In fact, there are organizations in the world, I don't know because I'm not in that field, that would have rated them. This is so class, so class. That is why Mercedes, BM, or any of these brands, the cost of their brand differs. And you wake up because you want to buy a brand that you are comfortable with. You just go and say, this is what I want to buy.
Exactly.
Why you know you can trust that brand. The question in building industry, you that want to build, who do you patronize?
Can I say something here?
The person that is your the consultants, do you know their names? Have you taken time to say, let me check, are you registered? Are you properly trained?
Look, you drew.
Okay.
I'm coming to you shortly.
Yes.
You drew a very fantastic analogy in saying one Bright Motors just suddenly came.
Yeah.
This Bright Motors may, for all you care, have met all the parameters. It is possible that he knows the industry. There was a time Toyota had to pull out a whole range of their vehicles because of one defect.
Yes.
So it is possible. But the point that you are making, and I do understand, is people buy more of aesthetics. That's essentially what you're saying, than the fact that, okay, these things, are really there, simply because they know that they can trust that brand. But people trusted a particular brand before, and they had to pull out all of their brand. I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying that people may not really be given to the fantastic details.
Yeah, let me throw in a very quick point on that. You're right in what you said. You're buying aesthetics, you're buying a car, right? And you're not buying the engine. No matter how powerful the engine is, what you're saying, what you're buying.
Unless you're a car freak.
Yeah, but there's something you forgot there. With buildings, lives are involved. That's the difference.
Yeah.
If the engine is not good, it just won't work.
With cars, lives are involved too. Because
it doesn't work.
Eventually. I don't understand what you're saying.
But for buildings, lives are involved. That's why you need to care about the engine.
Okay. Where the thoughts, what he said, the thoughts that they brought to my mind is there seems to be a lot of quacks in this industry.
A lot.
Why is that so, Ben?
Well, because there's a lot of money to be made. anywhere there's a lot of money to be made.
Simple.
There are the quacks. But then there should be consequences for the actions of the quack.
Okay, now we have just about 10 minutes. Let's look at solutions now and see what needs to be done. You've identified that there are quacks in the industry.
Sure,
and I'm almost certain that the number of quacks cannot equate the number of professionals in the industry. How does the Nigerian looking at us right now, listening to this conversation, who wants to avoid a building collapse before or after construction, what does he do? How does he go about finding the right person?
Very easy. Very easy. You contact a building professional. The first person of contact is the architect. Okay? And what most clients do is they will mandate the client, they will mandate the architect to bring the remaining professionals in the building team. But mark you, there are so many professionals in the building team. It's not only the structural engineer. We have the mechanical and electrical engineer there too. Okay? The architect needs them to midwife the building. So in most cases, they rely on the architects to bring in those professionals. All right? And they don't even vet the qualifications of those professionals and see that they're actually qualified to work with the architect. And then another problem with clients is that most of them don't know the value of a structural engineer in the building. They don't know.
Exactly.
The client or...
Most clients don't know the value of an engineer working in the building. If the architect tells them, or you tell them you need an engineer for a building, they don't understand what the work of the engineer is. So that's a very big problem.
So that, I guess that gives the engineering, industry a job of work.
They don't even know the value of the engineer.
Let me ask you, Engineer Adeboye, and you've all spoken quite eloquently about these issues, but you've spoken more to urban Nigeria. Someone in an Isenyi community, for instance, wants to build a one-story building of maybe just 2 rooms, or a block of story buildings, bungalow, that he can just be using for commercial purposes as well. Ordinarily, it will cost him maybe 1 million naira to build. Now you're advising this fellow to go get a structural engineer. How much does he have to add to his 1 million naira?
When we're talking about a bungalow, I don't think when you're talking about a bungalow in maybe a rural area, you may not need a structural engineer, because there's not a lot of there's nothing more of a structural element involved.
Apart from the foundation.
Apart from the foundation. So when we're talking about a structural engineer, we're talking about when we're talking about a story building, where we can have a slab and everything. And I want people to know that you can equate building construction to medical line. We all know that when we want to attend to our health, we know where to go. Even some people will make a finding on the hospital they want to go. So people will say, take me out of Nigeria so that I can get the best hand. The same thing you have to apply to building construction.
But I need you to also help people understand how it's different from, how urban building in urban Nigeria is different from rural Nigeria, because most of the collapses that we're talking about here happen in urban Nigeria. Much less of collapse in rural Nigeria is reported. Am I correct?
Yes.
So in that vein, are we saying that we don't have such cases in rural Nigeria?
When we're talking about building collapse, majority of the building collapse happen to be like high-rise building. We're talking about 7-story, where hardly you see 7-story in Isenyi or somewhere in Osun State. So, and then
you're saying that's why we don't hear of them in the rural area.
Then we're talking about soil condition. Let us take Lekki, for example. We know that the type of soil we have in Lekki is not the same thing we have in this environment. So you have to carry out the soil test, a lot of things. And then, mind you, it's not even, sometimes the environments where you want to erect your building can still be a little disadvantage, because of the type of the building, the construction that will come up in that area later on.
Necessitates the use of an engineer.
An engineer.
Okay. Now, Engineer Polo, he began by talking about the poverty of, or paucity of enforcement. In a situation, first, what would you advise government here in this case? What would you advise that government does? Because in a situation where in Lagos, government enforced and then the client went and clicked undo on the enforcement of government. What happens in that space? What does the engineer at site do?
Okay. There are laws. When we hear things like this, we begin to ask ourselves, because growing up, I was told that no one single individual is bigger than government. But when you begin to see things happening, you begin to ask yourself, what you were taught as a young person, has it not changed?
Corruption.
So what is happening? I don't want anybody to confuse me. Government should do what is right. Somebody has violated the law. My colleague here said there must be consequence. Arrest the person. The person, we, the professionals, we have asked since we have series of building collapse in especially Lagos. We've not heard of any single person taken to court or tribunal or anything, tried, convicted, and even sent to jail.
So you are assuming, or you are alluding collusion of government officials?
No, it may not be collusion. There could be other issues there. But what we are saying is that government should sit up. At least you let people be tried, and let there be consequences for doing what is wrong.
No for trial.
Then for the issue of quacks, I understand again from experience in the industry. People must have something on their table. Nigerians must eat. We should not forget about the building industry. Ordinarily is one area that we employ so many people. But we need to manage the process properly so that people will function within the area that they are trained to.
Competence.
Now, in construction, we have two categories. We have the consultants, those who are trained with certificate, university certificate. Then you have the contractors. Within the scope of the contractors, those hands-on things, the one that does what? Then you have the consultant, the structural engineer, the mechanical engineer, who will come to check that what this man is doing is right. So if we have that proper combination, the ones we call quacks, they will have the space to operate, because the ultimate goal is to have something on your table and feed their family. We are not saying that they should take food off people. Yes, but have a proper combination, consultants and contractors on site. Yes.
Engineer, he alluded to my last question to you, which is the fact that some of these quacks, as you call them, they just want to put food on the table. So there's poverty in the land. The person who Engineer Adeboye said wants to compromise on quality is also doing it because there isn't so much that he can do because of the limited cash flow on his own hands as well. Is there a place or a way we can draw a balance between getting you need with all the resources with the limited resources that you have and the professionals? Because not building is not an option.
That is true. Like you said, we have to balance design and construction. Remember, construction, you don't have to be an engineer to be a building contractor. Being a building contractor is all commerce field. You can have a degree in any profession and you're a building contractor. But you must be an engineer to be a design engineer.
Like, Alero doesn't have to be an engineer.
She can decide to be a building contractor, it's allowed. You can be a building contractor. But while being a building contractor, you should work with a design consultant who does the general overseeing of your job. You follow his instructions. So while you, as a non-engineer, playing a role in construction, you have an engineer supervising you. You do whatever he says and go according to the codes and practices. That way we'll strike a balance between the quacks and the engineers. Remember, anybody can be a contractor. It's allowed. It's an all-commerce field. But not everybody can be a design engineer.
It sounds like the beginning of conversations.
We are going to have to wind down now. Before we do that, Mr. Ben, I want to ask you, what are the various engineering bodies doing about this menace? Because at the end of the day, when these things happen, you are the ones we all look at.
Yes. And that's why you're here.
Where were you when this thing collapsed?
Yes.
What did you do? What are you doing? So what are the various bodies doing?
The various bodies have done all they can on paper.
On paper.
To ensure this does not happen. But like I said earlier when I started, it's enforcement. On paper, everything has been done. But enforcement is the issue. For example, when the 2020 building collapsed at Ikoyi, a panel was set up. Who headed the panel? We have quantity surveyors, we have architects, we have town planners heading the panel. How can that be?
So there is a problem there.
How can that be?
Okay. Well, as I said, it's a beginning of conversations, or rather, perhaps a continuation of conversations, so people have a better understanding of the process. For now, Engineer Ben Anyerion, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Engineer Dean Kadibayo, thank you.
Thank you.
As well as Engineer Brad Opono. All structural engineers, thank you so much for being here this morning. When we return from this break, Sunrise takes up another topic. Please stay with us.